Hey y'all, who dat and welcome in. I am Jeff Nowak. Sorry for the delay there. I been trying to figure out why the StreamYard is telling me that I have a slow and unstable connection, even though there's no reason for that. Did an internet speed test that's telling me I have a fast. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. This is Inside Black and Gold. We're going to go through here. I'm sorry if the feed is freezing or whatever, but the audio always records fine. So if I stop moving and I get caught in a weird face, just enjoy it. Take a screenshot, do what you got to do. But this is going to be our standard kind of quick hit Wednesday edition of Inside Black and Gold. This first segment, I'm going to go through the injury report, what we know, what we're looking at the rest of the way as the Saints head into week 13 in a pretty much must-win showdown against the Detroit Lions. It feels like every week we say must win this, must win that. It's must win for a reason, not necessarily must win mathematically, but losing to the Falcons pretty much makes it so this is now a game that you cannot afford to lose if you want to be able to say you control your destiny, whatever that means at this point, right? It's like every week the goalposts move in terms of what our expectations are for this team or what they have to do. But hey, we're gonna get into it. So that's gonna be the first segment. Second segment, a lot of people have been talking about it. Mickey Loomis was on WWL this week, and the whole we have the people in the building that we need, the right people in the building, all that sort of stuff. So I want to get into that and talk about, what your interpretation of that probably should be in terms of what did you expect him to say? What should he say? What should his approach be? And what should fans expect the GM of a team to say? So we'll get into a lot of that. Also talk to Dennis Allen today. We also talk to Derek Carr, but I'm going to save that for the Friday episode in terms of there's a lot to unpack from what we heard from Derek Carr this week. And haven't really had enough time to digest it all and to get it all set up. So I don't want to just throw it at you in this episode. I'm going to save it for the final episode, and we're going to dive into that. But we will hear from DA. And then in the final segment, I want to get to some questions for people who are watching. So if you have questions, comments, throw them in the mailbag, and we will get to that in the final segment. However many there are there, that's how many we will go through. But let's dive into the injury report first. This first segment will be quick, but there are a good number of injuries that we have to get into. So if you're watching this, I got the injury report up to my left here. This is the Wednesday injury report, first of the week. And it's basically just an echo of what we watched in the game, which was a lot of people going down with injuries. Not everyone left the game, but you are now seeing kind of the echo of those injuries in this. So defensive end Cameron Jordan, ankle injury. He did not practice on Wednesday. Dennis Allen said he's hopeful that Cam will be able to play. He's a guy who takes pride in not missing games. So we'll see over the next couple of days. I expect you'll see Cam get back to practice in at least a limited capacity. It's just a question of whether he can play at a high enough level to get out there. You did lose Jason Pierre-Paul off the practice squad. He signed with the Dolphins. He's a Miami guy. It's kind of just, the luck you have when the Dolphins had a guy go down with an injury. Suddenly they have a need. JPP literally grew up in South Florida. His high school was about, 40 miles away from Miami. It's like, it's definitely makes sense for him to go there. It's annoying because you really need depth on the defensive line right now. We'll get more into that, but he will not be there. Safety Marcus May dealing with a shoulder issue. He didn't leave the game, but he did hurt his shoulder. He did not practice on Wednesday. And personally, I've been very disappointed with Marcus May in terms of I just don't think he's getting the job done. And so, you don't want to see somebody get hurt, obviously, but I don't necessarily see this as a huge negative because I think you're better off with Jordan Howden on the field. So we'll see how that goes if Marcus can get back or if he's unable to go. I feel good about Jordan Howden. Running back Kendre Miller has been dealing with an ankle injury, still not practicing. That's frustrating. I would be surprised to see him go. Wide receiver Rashid Shaheed dealing with that thigh injury. Another guy I don't think you're going to have this week. It does sound like he avoided any major injuries, but it just doesn't sound promising for this week. Linebacker Pete Werner dealing with a shoulder/oblique injury. He is a guy we saw go down during the game, and he stayed in, but clearly he was playing through something. He didn't practice. I would be surprised if he misses the game, but if he doesn't, then, you got some serious questions at will linebacker. It's the position that we went into this season kind of looking at and saying, if either of these guys go down, being Demario Davis and Pete Werner, who goes in behind them? Because I still don't know, right? Like, we don't really know what the depth is. behind Pete Werner. Maybe it's Nephi Sewell. He's really the only option. Ty Summers is on the roster. He could be an option. You could elevate Anthony Orji from the practice squad. I think you probably would. If Pete Werner is inactive, you would elevate Anthony Orji. But Zach Bond is a Sam linebacker. He's not shifting over the way Caden Ellis did last year. He does not have that skill set. So your options would be maybe shift DeMario over to Will and play someone else at the mic, maybe a DeMarco Jackson, but that's not ideal either. So that's going to be one to watch. That's probably your most concerning injury in terms of what would you do to replace them. From there, there's two other guys with rest that we know about, Jimmy Graham, as always, and Ryan Ramczyk. This is something we see every week. Kicker Blake Grupe. Now, this is an interesting one because, there was some, I don't want to say confusion, but so the Saints worked out kickers on Tuesday. And without context, that sounds like, well, why are they working out kickers now? Blake just had a good game. He made 5 of his 6 kicks, right? He hit 5 kicks in a row, and now we're working out kickers. Well, so the context is Blake Grupe went on the injury report late in the week. He dealt with a groin injury, kind of crept up on him in practice. He kicked in the game. Dennis Allen wouldn't say that the injury affected him later in the game, but I think if you look at I think the last kickoff ended up real short, and then the last field goal attempt from 54, which we know he has the leg from 54. Even his misses have not been short; they have been left or right. And so you got to wonder if that groin injury crept up on him. When you ask a guy to kick 6 field goals in a game, and he's dealing with an injury, not exactly a stunner that might have crept up on him. Either way, Blake Grupe is day to day. DA put it, and so. You worked out kickers. You signed Austin Seibert to the practice squad, and that's kind of if he's a questionable going into the game, and you need another option, you can't go in without a kicker, and so that's you don't typically carry multiple kickers because it's just a roster spot that you're not really maximizing. So, but you do have Austin Seibert on the practice squad. It does sound like Blake's going to try to go. It's just a question of whether he can. I think Mike Triplett tweeted today that he talked to Blake and he said, basically, as long as they let me go out there and play, I'm going to play. Like unless they shut me down, I'm going to go out there. So I think you'll see Blake go out there, but that's why they worked out kickers this week. Center Eric McCoy also limited with his shoulder injury. He did suffer that in the game. He left for a period of time, came back in. The biggest question of the week, and it's really just a question of time, Chris Olave, wide receiver. He is in the concussion protocol. He did practice in a limited capacity, so while it's still unlikely that he plays, the only way that you could feasibly get him back would be for him to be at practice today, right? Like if he wasn't practicing today, you could basically write it off as, okay, he's out. But, with a limited practice, you do have a outside chance at him potentially clearing. Maybe it was not a major concussion. Maybe it was just them playing it safe, and so he's able to get through. We'll see. But right now, I think you have to go under the assumption that you will not have Rashid Shaheed or Chris Olave. And so that leaves you with a lot of questions at the wide receiver spot. And DA talked about that a little today. So let's hear what he had to say.
Yeah, look, there's going to be some guys that are going to have to step up. Anytime that you have guys go down, it creates an opportunity for somebody else to step up. I thought Lynn Bowden played well in the game the other day. So he's done some really good things. So I think if he's called upon to go out there and play significant snaps, I expect him to go out and play at a high level.
Those guys,
as do I all those guys.
It's a group that maybe doesn't have a lot of production in the NFL, but they still have experience. How can that be helpful, even if it's not necessarily like translated to games? They still have the reps anyway.
Yeah, look, I mean, we've got. A young player in A.T. Perry, and then we've got some other guys that have played in our league, and I think just the fact that you've played in NFL games gives you a little bit of experience. Those guys are going to have to step up and play, and we got all the confidence in the world that they'll step up and play well.
Yeah, and so it's funny because if not for the injuries, you would be sitting here saying, oh, well, I wonder if A.T. Perry's kind of gaffed there at the beginning of the game in the red zone where he didn't run his route because, and I look back at it, he did. It was pretty close to it. It's funny because the reason it wasn't called a false start is because I think the ref might have seen that he didn't actually false start. It was really close. Like he did move earlier than anybody else, but if you look at you time it, he basically moved with the snap of the ball. And even if he did false start in his own mind, he did it close enough that I think the ref was actually right not to call it. But it's funny. You look at that mistake by A.T. Perry, and you're like, well, that's not a great look for a rookie. That's going to hurt his chances to be trusted in big situations as the season goes on. Well, that's not the case this week. You don't have any other options, assuming Chris doesn't go, because A.T. Perry, Marquez Callaway, Lynn Bowden, right? Like Keith Kirkwood. Maybe you elevate John Trey Kirkland too. I don't know, but they didn't bring anybody in. They didn't go sign Traquan Smith off the Broncos practice squad like I thought maybe they would. So those are your guys. Those are going to be your options, assuming you don't get any surprise returns. Juwan Johnson should be a big part of that game. But that's kind of what you have to hope for is some of these young guys, some of these guys who haven't been used that much can step up. And, I think there you can point to some things for optimism in terms of, you did move the ball after Olave went out, right? Like there was positive momentum. You were able to get Chris Olave on some screens. Calvin Kamara on some screens. You blocked the screens pretty well. You ran the ball pretty well. Taysom got involved. Like I think the offense in general, and I know people are going to roll their eyes when I say this, you have moved the ball between the 20s. So to me, there's two worlds that you have to establish here. One is how do you move the ball generally speaking, right? How do you get drives going? And then the second question is, how do you finish drives? The Saints have actually been pretty good at the first one. They have been horrendous at the second one. And, unfortunately, that's the one where you look at and you say, why aren't we winning games? Well, when you get into the red zone 5 times and you come away with 9 points total, that's not going to win games. Everyone knows this. It is not a mystery. And so, those guys are going to have a big role to play. But you go to the Lions side of this, they're in much better shape. Although the funny thing is one of the only names that you're going to see on this Lions team that you will recognize is Alex Anzalone, or at least recognize in terms of, be familiar with, is Alex Anzalone. He is the only player that did not participate this week. He's dealing with a hand injury. Guard Jonah Jackson, ankle/wrist. He was limited. Running back David Montgomery has a foot issue. He's limited. Safety Tracy Walker, shoulder. He was limited. And then quarterback Hendon Hooker, who was actually brought back from injured reserve this week. He's dealing with that knee injury. Obviously, it's the ACL that he's missed all that time with. He's returned to practice, so he won't play in this game. But if you're a Hendon Hooker fan, which I know there's a lot of Saints fans who were interested in the Saints potentially drafting Hendon Hooker, he is back with the Lions this week. So just kind of an update, not going to affect this week at all in terms of the game, but just an update. And then center Frank Ragnow dealing with a back and toe issue. He was a full participant. And then safety Iafatu Melifonwu, I think I said that correctly. He's dealing with a hand issue, but he was a full participant. So, the Saints, this is one of the first games this season that the Saints go into it and you say, man, they are at a serious disadvantage because of health. And you could say it about week 12 in the Falcons, but, they're going to have to make it work. It's a situation where you either start it now or you don't. This is the ultimate sink or swim game. Because if you go out there and you lay a dud, this is your first of 3 consecutive home games. It's the first time that's happened since 2014 in terms of actual home games. They obviously had 3 consecutive home games last year, but one of them was in London. So call that what you want. Not really a home game. But the Saints are going to have to figure this out. They're going to have to figure it out in a hurry, and they're going to have to figure it out without several star players. So with all that, that's the injury report. That's what we're looking at. So we're going to be monitoring the next few days, and we will get into it. But this is Inside Black and Gold. That's the end of that segment. We're going to come back. We're going to talk about what Mickey Loomis had to say. And one thing that's annoying me in terms of how this Saints, I guess regime would be the word, in terms of how the Saints regime is operating as it pertains to their starting quarterback. And I know that's good. It's a loaded topic. Everyone's going to have thoughts, but we're going to get into it. Again, this is Inside Black and Gold. If you're watching and you want to get your questions answered, throw them in the feed. We'll have a mailbag what did I just say? We'll have a mailbag segment in the back end of this program. So again, throw your comments, questions in there, and we'll get to as many as possible. Thanks everyone for watching. We're right back. And we're back on Inside Black and Gold. I'm Jeff Nowak. This is our Quick Hitter Wednesday edition. And there's one topic that kind of caught fire on social media between last night and between, I guess, Tuesday night and Wednesday morning. And it came out of our standard weekly Mickey Loomis interview on WWL radio. Mike Haas does it, the voice of the Saints. And, you know, it's not exactly a point. But listen, you know what? One of the reasons I don't tell people, oh, you got to go listen to this, because Mickey really doesn't say anything. You know, he's what I'll say about Mickey Loomis as the Saints general manager is he understands how not to get in the way. And I say that in a positive way, because a lot of people will go and say, well, why isn't he more like David Tepper and Jerry Jones and completely, you know, and obviously you're talking owner, GM. These are two different situations, but those are situations where the owner is basically acting like a GM and making things about themselves, whereas they just need to make life easier on the people that they empower to do the job. They don't need to be forcing people to react to the things that they say. And I think that's how a GM should operate. The GM should not be making things about themselves. That said, you know, at a certain point, you have to say something. And at times, that something, even if you're trying to be positive, is not going to be taken the way you hope it will. And so you're talking about a 5-6 football team. You're talking about a team that has underwhelmed, to say the least, over 2 full seasons, basically. You're not quite through the second season, but you're getting close. You've seen what you probably need to see. At least a lot of people have, in terms of a regime that just has not gotten the job done. And so, you know, Mike asked Mickey about, you know, what his kind of role, what he feels like his role is in that part of the zeitgeist, if you will. And this is what he had to say. And I'll just kind of let this roll, and you can kind of take from it what you will.
I know it's a tough week out there, and I know, but you've got, is part of your job like the keep people focused on the task at hand, and I'm not saying keep people's chin up, and you know, but kind of focus on the future a little bit. I'm just trying to get a sense of, you know, they're tough times, but it is what it is.
Well, I think it's in any industry, any business. Part of leadership is, look, when things aren't going well, you can't just be negative. There's enough negative noise out there. We don't need to be negative. Not a lot of people get inspired by negativity. So, you know, part of our job is to focus on the positive, focus on what we're doing well, accentuate that, and not sweep the things that we aren't doing well under the rug, but attack them and improve in those areas. And I believe with all my heart we got the right people in the building. I know we do. There's too many other things that are good signs. I mean, we're 12th in the league on offense. We just had a game where we had 444 yards. We had, you know, 5 trips into the red zone. We're you know, in the top 10 in our league in trips into the red zone. So it's hard to score if you're not getting into the scoring area. We're getting into the scoring area. And historically, we've done a good job in that area for lots of different reasons, lots of different variables. We're not doing that as well this year, and yet I think we can. I think defensively we've had a number of games that we played really, really well. We've had a few games that we haven't played as well, and yet one thing we have continued to do different than past years is we've taken the ball away. I think we're at, if I recall, we're at 14 interceptions. I mean, that's a fantastic number. We've got, we're +6 as I said in the takeaway turnover ratio. That there's a lot of winning football being played, and yet we're doing some things that keep us from winning.
Right.
And so we've got to focus on that and correct it.
Yeah. So there's a few things to unpack there. One, if you're surprised by what you heard Mickey say there, you shouldn't be, because Mickey, as a GM, and you can say this is a fault, you can say this is a sign that they need to go a different direction at GM, they need to do whatever, but that's just who Mickey is and how he operates, in terms of he's never going to say something that is going to make the coaches, the players, everyone's life harder in terms of having to answer for something that he's saying. So, if you think that if you're waiting, if you're holding your breath for Mickey to go out there and say, no, this isn't good enough, this isn't good enough, this guy needs to be better, this guy needs to, he's not going to do that. This is not who he is as a GM in terms of, and I appreciate, I don't think that a GM meddling in that way is a positive thing. So, you're going to disagree with it, but at the end of the day, that's just what he's going to say. Anyway, so beyond that, he thinks he has the right people in the building. And at this point, I hope he does, because if he didn't, then he should be making changes. And I think that the reason that people react so harshly to what he said there is that they're worried that he's looking at this and saying, it's like the dog sitting in the fire meme, where it's like everything is fine. And I don't think that's, I genuinely don't think that that's true. I think that he does understand that this is not good enough, and you're kind of looking at this and saying, this is kind of a come to Jesus situation. Either you figure this out, or you're hitting the road, or a lot of people are hitting the road, right? And I think I said this on our Monday episode. It's not a question of whether changes need to be made at this point. It's how sweeping they need to be. And so for Mickey, it's more of a an analysis of how things finish and how you go forward. You're not making decisions right now because those won't benefit you. You're looking at this as the way you have to be. Now, where I will take some serious umbrage, I'm going to use that word because it's a good word, with what he said is no. The good things do not paper over the bad. You cannot look at 400 yards of empty offense and a bunch of failed red zone trips and say that is why this setup that you have is a good idea, right? There are things that will undermine all the good things that you are doing to the point that the good things don't matter. And one of those things is a quarterback who cannot get the job done in the red zone. Now, that's a problem. It was a problem when Derek wasn't turning the ball over, and it's a much bigger problem when you're making a throw like he did in that game, and then coming out and saying, well, Jesse Bates should have never done that. That's not his job. Why is he doing it? Well, part of his job is to read the quarterback's eyes and to try to make those interceptions. He's a star player. He's going to make that play. And the idea that you can come out and say, well, he did something that I didn't think he was going to do. Well, yeah, because you weren't paying attention. If you go back and watch the A.T. Perry play, right? The play where A.T. Perry never gets out of his stance and goes in the end zone, right? This is a third down play in the red zone, right? A few yards further back, I want to say, but you're in this, actually a few yards forward. Either way, you're in the same position. It's a third down. The Falcons are playing single high, right? And if you watch Jesse Bates, you can see him break on the inside route. It's not like a slant, it's more of a hitch, but he breaks on it. It's like a post. And, the ball was going to A.T. Perry. So he's breaking on that route. You're not throwing it there, but that's what he's doing. And then he comes back and he does it again on that next drive. And that's the pick six. And it's like, no, you need to understand what's happening. You need to be able to make changes and react in the red zone. And that's been the problem. And we're going to hear more from Derek Carr in the next episode, because a couple questions and I thought his answers were interesting, and they kind of play off what Alvin was talking about in the beginning of the week and what DA was talking about in the beginning of the week. But my bigger issue is how his struggles are completely, I don't want to say ignored, but glossed over in terms of why are we not holding him accountable for the struggles. Like I don't think that, I think that the idea that he can't get the job done on the whole is not necessarily fair. I think that every quarterback has their warts, that every quarterback has their high points and their low points. No one is as good as they are on their best day or as bad as they are on their worst day. But it's pretty freaking clear at this point that Derek Carr is not a good red zone quarterback. And so you have to find ways to work around that. Pretending it's not a thing is the problem I have. Pretending that it's not something that you have to actively navigate is my problem. And when I say that, it's because of things like this. And so this is Dennis Allen today kind of being pressed on Derek Carr and what he can do better. And this is what DA said.
We're not really in the business of blame game. We're in the business of production. And so I think we all have to be better.
Let me rephrase that. Is there anything Derek could be doing better at all, like anywhere on the field?
I think there's things that all of us can be doing better, so to try to single him out, I think is not the right way to go. I mean, I think, the game of football is the ultimate team game. It takes 11 guys on the field in every single phase. It takes all three phases. And so, I'm not going to get into, trying to associate blame to anybody. It's just an area that we've got to improve on.
See, and sure, like, you're not going to blame everything on Derek Carr. You're not going to go and say we would be successful if not for this guy, because it's not like it's not like you bring in anybody and suddenly you're better. I think Derek is above replacement level, but he's not by enough to justify what you sold people on in terms of the vision of Derek Carr. And pretending that's not true is, to me, a major driving force in what has so many people so frustrated with what they are watching, because you got sold a vision of what this was supposed to look like. And it's not that. And whether you want to blame Pete Carmichael, whether you want to blame Derek Carr, whether you want to blame Dennis Allen, when you're the quarterback of a team and you are struggling in such obvious ways in the most important part of the field, right? In the most important part of the game, which is scoring touchdowns when you are within spitting distance of the end zone, you can't pretend that it's a team game. And if not for this, if not for a penalty here or a fumble there, then it would all be perfect, because you can erase all of that other stuff and look at only the plays that everything works fine, and it's still not a success story. So what I need this team, this coaching staff, this front office to do, and Derek Carr for that matter, is to actually look themselves in the mirror and be honest about what they are looking at. Because while I don't think this is necessarily a full teardown right now, I don't think it is as bleak as a lot of people want to make it out to be. That's my frustration. That is my concern. That no one is taking seriously the actual problems that exist in front of them, and they are getting lost in the platitude of, it's a team game, I don't want to blame anyone specifically. Well, you brought in a guy in a position, in a role, on a contract where he is expected to perform at a level that is representative of that money, of that contract, of that position. And you haven't seen that. And you need to admit that that's the problem. before you can fix that problem. And I think everyone can see it. And I'm just tired of pretending that it's not there. And until they come to terms with that, it's just going to get uglier and uglier. So to me, that's my problem with the Mickey. Like again, I don't have a problem with kind of the idea of how Mickey operates. I don't have a problem with supporting the people you have put in place to do their jobs and allowing them to do it without the interference of some guy who honestly, you don't need to be hearing from as much as you do. It's one of the reasons that like I don't make a huge deal out of the comments Mickey makes throughout a season because he's not the coach, right? He's not the guy who's making the decisions in the heat of the moment. But at the end of the day, there has to be accountability. And we can't pretend that doesn't include the quarterback. It has to start with the quarterback. And so that's my long rant here. And that's going to be it. I'm going to wrap up that segment. We're going to get into the mailbag, but like, I get it, y'all. I get it. It's frustrating. And I think people misconstrue my hopefulness with just having blinders on. And no, it's because I want to watch good football. I want to hope for the best. I'd like people to be successful. But I think in order for them to do that, they need to be honest about it. So that's that. This is Inside Black and Gold. I'm Jeff Nowak. We're going to hit the break, come back, answer some mailbag questions. I've already got a few starred in there. But thanks, everyone, for watching. Thanks, everyone, for hanging around. I will be right back. And we're back on Inside Black and Gold. I'm Jeff Nowak. I'm your host for this here podcast. We'll be getting into a quick mailbag segment. This is our quick hitter Wednesday episode. We went through the injury report. We went through why the Saints are in denial about Derek Carr and all that. We'll keep going here. But so we got a few. We got Rose City D. You heard me. He says M3, but it's me. It says Mickey, DA, and DC, the three blind mice. I don't even know where that came from, but that's fair. And it is what frustrates me, and I know we just went into what frustrates me, but I'll continue to go, is it's not that it's even the same problem every week, right? There are different problems every week. Like it's not that the same thing keeps happening over and over again. It's that different things happen that all result in the same end product. And the problem I have is you hear the same answers every week, and I think that's what frustrates Alvin, right? We talked about Alvin and what he said. And, it's like we keep saying these things. We keep saying we need to be better. We need to do this. We need to do this. But what's actually changing? What's actually different? And one thing that DA said this week that I think, okay, fine, there is an actual bit of information there. And because I asked him, okay, so you're going to focus on red zone. You're going to work on getting better in the red zone. But what does that mean? What does that actually entail? Right. And so one of the things the Saints are doing this week is they're moving their red zone work up from Friday to Thursday. Right? You only get 3 days of practice in the week, 3 real days of practice. Like you get a couple walkthroughs, you get classroom time, but you get 3 practices, and so you have to prioritize time in those practices. And so typically how teams will operate, and this is not a Saints thing, typically how things will operate is on Wednesdays you will do first, second down. On Thursdays you will work on third down. And on Fridays you'll work on red zone, situational stuff. Well, this week they are moving up red zone to Thursday and getting some of that work done there. And that's in addition to what they would typically be doing on Friday. So when they say we're devoting more time in practice to this, that's kind of what it means, because you have this pie of time, right? And you have to just carve slices out of it. What are we going to work on, and how much are we going to devote? How much time are we going to devote to this, to this, to this? While you are increasing that pie, whatever slice that is for red zone, you're increasing it. And so that's kind of how it works. So if anyone wondering, oh, what does that mean in terms of devoting more time? That's kind of what you're looking at. Will that help? I don't know. But I guess more time on task, at least it's a, when I get frustrated with the Dennis Allen answers, it's usually just because there are no specifics. There's nothing. It's all just generic coach speak. It's a team game. We got to be better. Well, at least that's a tangible answer of one thing that is changing from a preparation perspective. So, if I ask for something and I get the answer, I can't be mad about the answer. So at least there's something there. Rose City also says the Saints are probably blocking my feed. I don't know. Is this all freezing? Because I can't tell, but I just get this notification, in case everyone wonders, when I talk about when the feed doesn't work. So I get this notification in the top left that says unstable Wi-Fi. And what my experience has been that on the video feed, it basically just freezes. Like the sound comes through, but the video freezes. And I know that's annoying as hell for people watching. And I get annoyed when I go back and try to do stuff with the video, and I'm just like, for 19 seconds or whatever. As if it's not annoying to you, I don't really care. But I feel like it is annoying. So that's when I get all worked up about the internet not working. That's usually what I'm mad about. But I appreciate everyone sticking through even with that. Jerry G says, I want to hear fire DA for the next 3 games of the Dome, loud and proud. And I haven't been here that long, right? Like I've been here since I've lived in New Orleans since 2016. I have covered the Saints since 2018. And it's funny because every kind of coaching tenure that goes poorly, it all makes sense in reverse. Like you look back on the Jim Haslett era and you're like, well, of course that wasn't going to work because we know how it ended. And you look at this one and you're saying, okay, is it already over? Is it too far gone for this team to prove anything, to come back and show that this has not been a 1.5-year project down the tubes? And it's tough to say. It could be, maybe it is. I do know that this team has a chance, right? It has a chance to go out these final 6 games and give people something to enjoy, something to be proud of. And I personally would love to see it happen, right? Like, again, I'm never going to be the pessimist and say, because I know how cool it would be for a team to just go out and win its final 6 games. Look at the Lions, right? Like, we can talk all we want about how the Saints are dead in the water. But look at how the Lions turned their hopes around, their whole team around in one stretch that didn't even get them to the postseason. Right? In 2021, the Lions under Dan Campbell went 3-13-1. 3-13-1. In 2022, the same Lions squad started the year 1-6. They were 4-7 at one point, right? They won 5 of their last 6 games, finished 9-8, missed the postseason. They beat Green Bay. They beat the Packers in a game where the Packers could have made the postseason with a win against a Lions team that had effectively already been eliminated, and the Lions went out and won. You don't think people were calling for Dan Campbell's job after 3-13-1? You don't think people were calling for Dan Campbell's job even louder at 1-6, even after a 3-game losing streak? They drop a game to Buffalo, and you don't think people are calling for his job again at 4-7? So, I mean, it's not as cut and dried as it's over and they don't have a chance. You got to go win a game, right? You got to go prove something to yourself and to your fans. And if you can't do that, by all means, right? Yell fire D. I'm not going to be mad about it. I get it. I understand why the hashtag is trending. I get it. But I would like to think that if this team could go out and win a couple games in a row and give people a reason to just get excited about something, that people would be on board with it, that they wouldn't bail on it in advance just because, well, what are we really you're rooting for a team because you root for the team. But I mean, I would be surprised. It's one of the funny things about being on the field during introductions is you get a much better scope for how loud the boos are, right? You get like kind of a range of like, wow, that's a loud cheer for Tyrann Mathieu. That's a loud cheer for Taysom Hill. And then they announce Derek Carr and it's like, yikes. Or they show Dennis Allen. It's like, that's not the sound you want to hear. And the Jaguars game was probably the best example of a game where I've heard more first half boos toward the home team in the Superdome than I've ever heard. And so, yeah, if they go out and lay an egg, like again, like I'm not gonna hope for negative things to happen. It's just not my personality. It's just not what I'm gonna do. But if they go out and lay an egg against the Lions, it's gonna get ugly. It is. Like, I don't care what they come back and do against the Panthers. I don't care what they come back and do against the Giants. I don't care how much you're gonna look at this and say, well, it's not over, right? Because the team won't quit. The team won't go into a barrel. But if you can't be competitive with the Lions and come out with a win, it's going to get ugly. And that is your own doing. That is because of what you have done to this point in the season. So we'll see. Rose City D says, walking wounded, Saints mash unit again. Yeah, that's kind of where you're at. All right. Justin Pasquale. I don't know if I'm saying that right, whether it's Pasquale or Pasquale. Either way, thanks for being here, Justin. It says, after the Falcons ran for over 200 yards, when the game plan was clearly stop the run, I'm terrified the Lions running back tandem could replicate that, and we give up 200 rushing yards 2 weeks in a row. Yeah, David Montgomery's dealing with an injury, so we'll have to see. It's a foot injury. That's obviously when you're a running back and you have a foot injury, that's not ideal. So we'll have to see just how significant that is. But Jahmyr Gibbs is very good. I'm actually, it's funny because I love the running back tandem that the Lions have. It reminds me of what the Saints tried to build. Like, it's what the Saints were hoping for with Alvin Kamara and Jamal Williams, right? Like, it's what that was supposed to be. The problem is you're not getting, I'm sure the Lions are very happy with what they've gotten out of David Montgomery. The Saints have gotten nothing out of Jamal Williams. And, as I know, Jamal was frustrated because the Lions just kind of just said, whatever. But, if this is the production you're getting, then they made the smart move, and I love Jamal. I think Jamal's great. Like, he's one of the most fun people I've ever dealt with. Just hasn't been good. And it's a production business, right? Like, you can't just you can't live on personality in the NFL, right? And right now, that's all you've gotten out of Jamal. And maybe this is the game, right? Maybe this is the revenge game where Jamal can get it done. And I know this question was about the Lions run game, but you got to see something out of Jamal, man. You got to see something. Maybe this is the week. I don't know. But yeah, Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. And it's less about the running backs than it is about the offensive line, because the Lions' offensive line is very, very good. The other things the Lions will do is they're going to go on fourth down constantly. They're not going to, there's those moments where, you might gain some percentage points by the other team being like kind of cowardly and not going on fourth and short. The Lions ran a fake punt against the Packers from their own like 28-yard line. They didn't get it. The Packers stopped it. But I mean, that's the type of thing they put pressure on, they never let up. And that's what I'm concerned about for the Saints is they don't, it's like they just seem desperate to get off the field. And if it's like when you do convert those, one of the reasons I really do, I've always been a proponent of the hyper aggressive fourth down on fourth and short, right? Not fourth and 6, not fourth and 9, fourth and 1, go. I don't care where you are on the field, freaking go, because it's a high percentage play. And when you get it, it's a backbreaker, because I don't care what defenses say. When they get a stop on fourth and short on your side of the field, they take a sigh of relief. They're like, thank God, we got to stop. We can get off the field. If you force them to defend another down and they don't get it, you know how demoralizing that is for a defense? Like I don't know the stats. It would be almost impossible to put the stats together, but I guarantee you the percentage of drives that end in a touchdown after a 4th and 1 conversion is way higher because it's like, think about the Texans game, right? You got to stop, and they weren't going to go, right? D'Amico Ryans, they had 4th and 1. They weren't going to go. They actually took a delay of game because they did a hard count and got back to 4th and 6, right? And then the Saints had a dumb penalty and they had 4th and 1 again, and they went that time, right? Like, it's so weird, but it's like that's just messing with the mind of a defense. And once they decided to go, I was like, it's a touchdown. Like, you're not going to stop them now, because the defense, it's such a mentality thing on defense. If you can build confidence and you can continue to make plays, then that does, like, so much of defense is just energy. And when you take it away from a team, you gain a huge advantage. And that's what the Lions are so good at. And that's what the Falcons were able to do to the Saints on that 95-yard touchdown drive, is they took away the will from that team. And when you're a defense and you watch your offense go downfield and fail to score time after time after time after time, that doesn't help your defense either in that regard. But yeah, so I share your concern. I asked Dennis Allen about this today, and it's just, you got to be better than you were against the Falcons. And the question is, can you be, right? I think Isaiah Foskey is going to be back. That is something that I meant to talk about in the injury report segment, is the best update you could have on Isaiah Foskey is he's not on that list. So you should get Isaiah Foskey back. The problem is, I don't think that he's necessarily a huge benefit for you in the run defense part of the game. I do think that he is a guy you want to have back against some of these mobile quarterbacks, particularly if Cam Jordan is out. But again, if Cam Jordan can't play, or he has to have his snaps limited severely, you're going to get a big workload for Isaiah Foskey. And so maybe this is a game where you can see what you have in your second round pick. Either way, thanks, Justin. There's another one from JP. Says our offensive game plan is going to have to be pound the rock, and Juwan Johnson has to show up big in this game with all the injuries. Kamara and Hill game, it's looking like, I mean, you have weapons. You have to find ways to use them. And to the Saints' credit, they were able to do that. Now, you didn't get in the end zone, obviously, but they were able to manufacture offense in creative ways with Lynn Bowden and all of this. So hopefully that's a sign. That's a good sign that you won't come out of this game being like, maybe it's just another game where you can't score touchdowns. But I'd rather them be able to move the ball at all than, like the Titans game early in the season, right? Okay. Here's one that I think is worth talking about. St. John Butler says, did the Saints botch the JPP thing, or did they really not see him in their plans for 2023? JPP was on the practice squad. You signed him to the practice squad. That was always the plan. You wanted to see him in a game, right? Like, I think that it's not unreasonable to say the Saints weren't wrong to want to see him in a game before they signed him to the active roster, right? And so they did. And the timing of it was unfortunate, because you played JPP, there's tape on him. He looked fine. I mean, he didn't look bad. I don't think he looked great, but he didn't look bad. And then you have a Dolphins team that suddenly lost Jalen Phillips for the year. They're starting outside linebacker, and JPP is a guy who has played outside linebacker. So the Dolphins are looking around, being like, "Oh, who can we pick up?" And when you know it, there's this guy. He's a South Florida guy just sitting there, and so they go and sign him. And I don't know if the Saints tried to retain him. I imagine they did, but you don't really have much say there. It's either he wants to sign here or he wants to sign there. You saw the same thing with Latavius Murray last year, and he just saw more opportunity. I think it was with the Ravens, or maybe it was the Bills. I think it would have been the first time. I think he left and went to the Ravens. The second time, I think he went to the Bills. Either way, he saw better opportunity. He saw a bigger chance for a role, and he saw it in essentially his hometown, and so he took it. So I don't know. Like, I can't hold that against them. I think they did everything the right way there. And you're just, it's just how it works, right? One of the reasons that this happens a lot more than it used to is because you can have veteran players on the practice squad and call them up, and then they get opportunities. So good for JPP. He's got a role. But I wouldn't say that they botched it. It's just how it works. Brandon Begard. If DA blames someone like the kicker, the QB, the D-line, these are all the things that he decided to screw with in the preseason. Yeah, well, in defensive DA, I think everyone was willing to agree with the idea that's like, no, you can't just miss 29-yard field goals and say, oh, it happens, right? Like, no, that's unacceptable. You can't be doing that. And I think for a young kicker, you gotta, there's come to Jesus moments, and that was probably one for him, So I wouldn't say that he blamed the kicker per se, but he did make it clear that it's like, you either get the job done or we find someone that can do it. He has done that, but for whatever reason, and it's mostly in training camp, right? You hear it more in training camp because I think coaches are trying to send messages more often in training camp. But yeah, no, I agree that it's like, you have to take ownership of your decisions, and you have to also hold people accountable for their play. And yeah, I get it. It's a team game, and you don't want to throw people under the bus, but you also have to be honest about what's going on. Rose City D, you heard, says at least Jameis would take blame regardless. See, I mean, I'll just say this. One of the things that has always annoyed me about Jameis, and it's just the way he is he talks in platitudes, right? Like, you can say that Jameis will take responsibility, but yes, he will, but he also won't say anything. Like, he also won't, like, go any deeper than it's on me. Like, he'll say it's on me. It's on me. And that's not better, right? That's just a different version of not saying anything. And it's very similar to why I get annoyed at DA, because DA is not going any deeper than this kind of general platitude coach speak. And it's not completely unusual, right? But I don't know if that's the difference. And like, to Derek's credit, like, he's always congenial. Like, I wouldn't say he's passing the buck per se, but I also don't know if he's generally just kind of being upfront. And he basically said that today. I think it was Nick Underhill who asked the question about, like, okay, how do you fix things in the red zone? And he's like, I'm not going to tell you. I'm going to say a bunch of stuff, but there's going to be no answer in there. And, it's like, so you're aware you're doing that. Like, you're doing that. So it's like, there's just different versions of the same thing. Let's see. There's a few more comments I want to get to before we go. Yeah. Murray Broncos. Latavius, did he go to the Broncos? Now I got to look this up, because I know Latavius Murray ended up on the Ravens, but I think that was in 2020 after he got cut. If you recall, he got cut for Tony Jones. Latavius Murray, I want to say he signed with he signed with the Ravens. I think you're correct. Last year he went to the Broncos after they signed him off the practice squad because Javonte Williams got hurt. And then this season he's on the Bills. Yes, that's exactly what it is. So yeah, you're right. I got that mixed up. 2020, he got released. They kept Tony Jones. He went and signed with the Ravens. He came back in 2022, played that game in London, then got signed off the practice squad by the Broncos, after a season-ending injury to Javonte Williams. This season, he signed a 1-year deal with the Bills. Fun fact, he is the oldest active running back on an NFL roster. So, yeah, thanks, Brandon. Yeah, that it's kind of confusing. There's a lot of teams involved there, but you got it. Brian Russell says, please tell me Mickey was just doing PR with that BS interview. He has to be saying something else behind closed doors. He can't be this naive. I mean, yeah, I think whenever Mickey talks, there's a PR spin, right? Like, but that's part of his job, right? Again, Mickey understands that his role is not to make life more difficult on the players and the coaches. That's just not, whatever he says behind closed doors, whatever he thinks, you're not going to know that. He's not just come out and be like, yeah, we're going to let DA coach out these last 6 games. But if he doesn't get it done, he's gone. He's toast. We're canning him. Like, he's never going to say that. So if you're waiting around for Mickey to go on a radio station, whether it's ours or someone else's, and say something like that, you're just going to be waiting a long time. It's just not who he is. And again, I don't think that GMs should do that, right? Like, I think the GMs that end up like bigger than their own britches and acting like they're the star of the show, they're the main character of this whole thing. I think that's a bigger problem. Yeah, okay, we got it. Definitely went to the Broncos. Murray with the Bills now. We got a lot of these. And thank you. Yeah, I got that wrong initially, I think. Brandon Bygard says, "Go Pels! Go Pels! They won the in-season tournament. In-season champs. What's going to happen when the Pelicans win the in-season tournament and miss the playoffs? That would be such a Pelicans thing to do. Anyway, let's see. Justin Pasquale says, we don't blitz at all like we used to. And if the defensive line hasn't been putting pressure, then obviously we need to send some blitzes and help them out. We cannot afford to not pressure Goff and company. It's funny because they did send more blitzes in their last game. And that's kind of what I predicted in terms of you lose Marshawn, you get a little more aggressive on the blitz front. And that's, it's a double-edged sword, right? When you do that, you put a little more pressure on the back end. You have guys who are not maybe your best in coverage asked to cover one-on-one. And that's how the Falcons end up with Bijan Robinson outrunning Demario Davis to the corner of the end zone, right? And that's what happened on that play. You blitz Pete Warner. Demario has to track Bijan out of the backfield, and he gets beat, and so I don't think they've been blitzing less this year than they have in the last couple of years. But the last 2-3 years, in general, you have not been blitzing as much as maybe you were earlier on, but back before you felt good about your cornerback situation. And so, it's funny because with a guy like Goff, I don't know. It's like, I would like to see the Saints be able to generate pressure with their front four. And because Goff is a guy who's not going to outrun Carl Granderson, right? If you can get him uncomfortable in the pocket, then you should be able to get him to the ground. And that's one of the reasons I feel a little better about this matchup than I think a lot of people do, because the Saints are built to play a quarterback like Jared Goff. The problem is you just don't get a lot of these matchups, right? And so maybe this is a kind of a get right opportunity for the defensive line, and maybe you don't have to send as many blitzes because the Lions have good pass catchers, but I don't think that they're anything you can't handle. Like, I'm more worried about the run game than the pass game. And so if you're kind of making that decision, you're saying, no, we're going to devote more in coverage and kind of pack the box a little bit and keep guys close to the line. I don't think blitzing is necessarily the answer, but we'll see. You can go both ways with it. And that's true. It's always, that's what it always is, right? Damned if you do, damned if you don't. Brian, it's a good question. And we can end on this question. It says, what will it take for the head coach to be fired? And so my thing, and I've been consistent on this, guys, and people I think people get annoyed with me because I'm not as violently in on the fire everybody and move on train. And it's just because I'm being just pragmatic. I'm being realistic in that I don't think Dennis Allen gets fired in season. And I don't think anybody gets fired in season because that's just not how the Saints operate. The Saints value organizational stability. And while that's going to get a big eye roll, it's a fact. It's a fact. And if you can come to grips with that, you can understand why this is the way that it is. And so to me, it's like, okay, you're not firing the coach in season, but you are setting benchmarks and you are saying you better live up to them or you make changes, right? And so, then the final 6 games is going to be important, right? Like the final 6 games is going to inform a lot of your decision making. If you can make the playoffs and you can get to the post, if you can win the division and get to the postseason, and you feel like you turned a corner, you unearthed some things, you got on the right track, then I don't know. Maybe you don't fire the head coach and you just clean house on the offensive side of the ball, and like you kind of did on the defensive side last year, right? And you just kind of rebuild some things, go draft a quarterback maybe, and say, okay, Derek, you're stuck with Derek Carr. That's the confusing part of this. Is it's going to be really difficult to do anything beyond bring Derek Carr back and figure something out. So you just have to go from there and say, what is our best option? And so to me, Dennis Allen gets fired if the team quits. Like if you go out and lose to the Lions, like not just lose to the Lions, but lose to the Lions by 20, like get embarrassed by the Lions at home, right? To the point that, man, this isn't working. Like this not even not working. This is on fire, right? Then I still don't even think you necessarily do that immediately, but you kind of make the bet has been made at that point. And then the last 5 games, you face a bunch of teams that you should be. If you can't win those games, then yeah, fire everybody, right? Like it's a failure. You're not going out of this season at 6-11 and saying, maybe next year, right? Like, you can't. I mean, you can't. Personally, I don't think you can. So to me, that's probably what's going to happen if you completely flub the final 6 games of this season. Yeah, you get fired. Now, do you have pride? Does this team have pride? Will it come out and play with pride? Because I think people went into the last month of last season and said, "Man, it's over." That loss to the Bucs, they're completely dead in the water, and then they go out and win 3 games. And you can say there's some caveats to that, but we don't need to pretend that they went out to Cleveland and played in the Ice Bowl and they had no ability to just fold. So, I mean, I think that's kind of where you're at, right? I think to me, it's like, okay, you look at these final 6 games and it's going to inform how much of this you have to tear down. Like I said, I think we're past the point where we're debating whether there's changes needed. It's just you're figuring out the levels to which you need to make changes. And I think that's why when you're Mickey and you're kind of coming out and giving these kind of frozen in carbonite takes, that's why, because you're not making any decisions right now because you don't have to, right? Like what benefit do you have of making decisions right now? You're kind of just like, you don't know who's going to be available. You don't know how many teams are going to be firing coaches, right? And so you're kind of just in a holding pattern. You're watching and hoping for the best. But like I said, it's going to annoy people. But I've been pretty consistent on this, so I'm not gonna waffle now. But I get it. I get why everyone's frustrated. This has been a long mailbag, so I'm gonna cut it off there. And Brian Russell's, that's why I kind of corrected myself, because it's saying it's been on fire. It feels like it has been, and everything's been on fire except for the Saints offense. And it's hard to see a scenario where that fixes itself, but that's why they play the games, right? We'll see. And I am curious to see how the fans are in the stadium on Sunday, because it could get ugly. It could get ugly, and we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But thanks everyone for listening. This is Inside Black and Gold. I'm Jeff Nowak. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do that. I'll still be here for the final 6 games, whether DA is or not. But yeah, thanks everyone for listening. If you want to hit me up, do so on Twitter at Jeff_Nowak. You can follow the show at Saints_pod. Or you can check out the latest news, notes, and analysis, the latest Mickey Loomis interview on WWL.com, and we will go from there. Who dat? Go Saints. Thanks, y'all. Be easy. Peace.